Hello. Welcome back to what did we call this podcast again? Mangoes?
Either Mangoes or Murder with Mo.
I feel like after the fourth episode, we should make our mind at this point. Steph,
Oh.
as marketing leader, you got to tell us what the name is. Sole decision. Until next week, of course, when we argue it again. Steph is gone. Or did I leave? Oh no, Steph.
Uh-oh.
Steph left. Every single time we talk about anything marketing, Steph's computer miraculously gets destroyed.
She's like, oh no, I'm unavailable.
Wait, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can hear you now.
That's so weird.
Is it Steph?
Yeah, it's really weird.
Every single time I ask you to make any sort of decision, it's so weird. Steph, we need you to make a decision right now. Please don't die, computer. What's the name of the podcast? Go.
Oh, I guess it depends on if we're gonna stick with the murder theme or if we're gonna.
All right, I guess we're gonna have to. I guess all number Steph has to see the numbers later on. What's going on? All right. Today we're gonna be talking about these trio of killers called the Freeway killers. There's really one main freeway killer, but there was a whole bunch of unfortunate like hitchhiking on the freeway killing that happened in the 70s and early 80s, and it has to do with these three killers. Today we're just going to talk about one of them, William George Bonin. He's the one that's known as usually as the Freeway Killer, and in 2010 there's a movie called Freeway Killer which just has William Bonin in it. So I looked at I was going to watch the movie to do the research. I looked at the trailer and I was like, I could not. There's no way I could watch that movie. I implore everyone to take a look at that trailer and tell me that you would watch this movie, yes or no. It's got a 5.4 on IMDb, and I think that's probably way too high. Someone paid for that.
Wow, it looks that bad.
It's a movie made in 2010, but I swear to you, it's like a 1995 kind of style movie.
Oh.
In fact, I read 2010 made, and then I watched the trailer, and I was like, wow, this was probably made in like 1990 or something. And then I looked back, and it said 2010, and I was like, that's insanity.
Maybe it was going for that vintage 90s feel.
Maybe
like low budget.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking maybe it was like in production in the 90s and then finally released in 2000. I didn't do too much research on the movie. I'll be honest. I just took a look at the trailer and I was like, that's more than enough at this point.
Wait, when did these murders happen?
So these happened starting in 1970. Let me take a look here. I think it's 70.
Oh, so yeah, maybe it was like a period piece.
Yeah, 1979 was.
Oh wait, 1970. I thought you said 19.
No. So these freeway killings happened between late 70s, so 78, 79, until early 80s. So like I don't know when the last killing was, but I think it was in the 80s. So all was wrapped up before the 90s. In fact, you know what, I was gonna say what happened to Bonin, but we'll keep that to the end, even though you can just quickly look at it. But I have a quick question. All right, so hitchhiking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Huge back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And then I'm assuming because of the freeway killings and, a trio of killers known as the Freeway Killers, kind of pushed that away from being, popular to I wouldn't hitchhike. Now, I think to myself, okay, let's say I'm walking down a highway. For some reason, my car broke down or something, and it's night. No way in hell am I going in anyone's car. I don't care if it was the person who pulled up was in a punch buggy and it was just two puppies. For some reason, they're able to drive. One's doing the pedals, the other is just doing the steering wheel. No way I'm getting in that car. You know what I mean?
Really? Even if the car was being driven by puppies?
Even if the car was being driven by puppies. It's just, it's so... At night? All right, Eunice. You're going to tell me right now you're stuck in the highway for some reason. Phone is dead. Because, come on, I can understand in the 70s and then in the 80s there's no cell phones. But now, your cell phone's dead. Car, punch buggy, no punchbacks, red. Game comes down. Two puppies are in it. One's operating the pedals, the other's operating the wheel. You going into the car? They roll down the window and they just go bark.
Bark? Probably not, because I would assume that those are ghost puppies. Probably a haunted car.
Oh, I forgot. You're one of those people who believe in ghosts. And for some reason, these ghosts are going to be in a red punch buggy. And they're going to be in the shape of two puppies.
I can't explain the logic of the supernatural.
I mean, we're already in a crazy-ass scenario of two puppies driving a red punch buggy.
Exactly. I mean, they must be possessed by ghosts. But it'd be very tempting.
Okay, Steph. You get in the car?
With a ghost?
No. Somehow it's like two puppies.
Oh.
No. So you're on a highway. Car's broken down. right? So you're walking down the highway, to get to the nearest, let's say, petrol station, gas station. I don't know why I say petrol, gas station.
Mhm.
And you're gonna get gas, but you don't know how far it is, right? You're on a highway, you're not 100% sure. Phone is dead. No cars on on this highway.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, a red Volkswagen Beetle rolls up next to you, right? Because you're on the shoulder walking. Rolls up next to you, rolls down the window. It's two puppies. One is doing the pedals, the other is doing the steering wheel. Rolls down the window and goes bark, as in like opens the door for you, tells you basically to get in. Are you getting in? Okay,
What?
that's what I'm saying.
No.
Hitchhiking. Would you do it essentially?
Oh, I mean, I would do if it was like a solo
feel like-
woman.
I feel like no. I feel like that's
A realistic
interesting.
situation.
So two puppies, no, but a solo woman, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like the fact that
I guess-
puppies can drive is a bit suspicious.
I guess. I
Yeah,
mean, I was just thinking
exactly.
like, what's cute and like
Oh.
would get me in a car, because I feel like I mean I was gonna say a woman, but I don't want to be sexist. You know what I mean? Like, oh, if there was a woman driving, would I get in? No. The answer is no. I wouldn't get in.
Yeah, women can be scary too.
I just feel like a logical person or a logical woman or man wouldn't let someone in their car that they didn't know. So it goes
No.
both ways,
Okay,
you
so
know?
for sure, right? That's also another thing. Would you? All right, you're also driving, and then you see a woman, let's say, walking down the highway. She looks distressed. Are you gonna stop and try to help her?
Oh, this is at night?
Mm-hmm.
If it was during the day, I'd
Okay.
be more open to it. At
'Cause I
night,
feel like- Eunice,
too
what would you do?
risky.
I don't know. I have to like make sure she's not a ghost, you know?
Oh my god. Eunice, if she was a ghost, she would have been in the car. There's no choice at that point. It's not one of the ghosts aren't one of the
No way.
situations where you have to invite them in. This is not like a vampire kind of situation.
No, it could be one of those ghosts where like as soon as you give them any indication that you can see them, they're like, "Oh, you're mine now. I'm gonna haunt you."
I don't know what kind of wacky ghost world you live in, Eunice. But let's just say you can 100% tell that they're human. Let's just go back into just for a
Okay.
second, Eunice. Let's get out of your crazy universe, right? And get out of my crazy puppy driving universe, and let's go into this normal universe. It's in the morning. Let's just do it. It's in the morning or afternoon, early morning. Let's just say
Oh, okay,
going down the
daylight.
highway. Yeah, because I feel like daylight is the easiest. Night, would you even see them? I'm probably barreling through faster than the speed limit, so I probably won't see this person
True.
on the side. Also, what I've come to notice sometimes when I'm driving is that there'll just be abandoned cars on the side. I was in Texas, and there was a lot of abandoned cars on the side.
That's really crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
there isn't as
creepy.
much in New York, but Texas, there was like a whole
Yeah.
bunch. Florida, it was in the night, it was in the morning, it was everywhere. It
That's
was
so creepy.
When I was driving in
Mhm.
New Mexico, we didn't like see a car for like a
Jeez.
full hour.
Wait.
was just,
Oh,
like, in the middle
see
of the
another
desert.
car.
Yeah, we were like the only ones. So if our car broke down,
You would be the people in distress.
yeah. Would I pick up Steph and Patrick?
yeah,
Hell no. Hell no, I wouldn't
Yeah,
pick you guys up. You know what's funny? 10 years ago. 10 years? Yes, 10 years ago when I first got my license, I used to tell myself, yeah, you know what? 100%. I'll pick up anybody. You know what I mean? Like, what? Like, specifically in the morning. I'm not talking about night. Night is a whole different situation, right? In the morning, it's just like, in my mind, I was like, who's going to do anything in the morning? Plus, it's my car. You know what I mean? I'm ready and I'm willing to if they pull out a gun, I'm ready and I'm willing to kill us all. You know what I mean? I'm crashing right into the nearest, not building, but nearest tree, nearest whatever.
Oh,
You know
so
what I
your
mean? I
logic
feel like-
was-
Yeah, my logic is like, I'm the one even if they're holding a gun, I'm the one that's also holding a gun because I'm driving,
Mhm.
you know?
Right.
But now I'm like, what am I talking about? Like, you could be driving down a highway and there'll be nothing there. They'll just shoot me in the leg and then what?
Yeah, then you crash your car and then you're extra stranded with them.
Yeah. Then I have to go out bloody and like, hey, can you stop?
And hope that if I'm driving by, I don't think you're a ghost.
Oh my god. I swear, if that happened, you drive by, you stop, and you're like, "Are you a ghost?" I would be like, "Just keep going. I'll get the next one."
Don't want to be stuck with me.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think I would. I mean, in an emergency, I wouldn't. Let's just put it this way, right? I'm a guy. You guys are girls. So I mean, I would just. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable walking at night on an empty highway. But if a car stops and it's like, "Hey, get in," hell no, I'm not getting in. I don't know about you guys, but I should for sure. I'm not getting in. Even if the person could be a woman, it could be a man, it could be anything. I just feel like I just walk. Do you know what I mean?
what if it's like raining? Or, like,
Okay, if I'm gonna
snowing?
freeze to death, I'm dying anyway.
You're not gonna freeze to death, but you're gonna be very uncomfortable.
No, then no, that's fine. Just because it's just like I know what's gonna happen if I walk. Do you know what I mean? I guess the snow. I didn't think about the elements. If it's raining, that's perfectly fine. If it's like below freezing or I'm in the Antarctic or something, yeah, I'm getting in. Because it's just like, well, I know I'm gonna freeze to death here, but like maybe I'll survive in the car. Yeah, 100%, I'm getting in. But like, what's the scenario that will get you in this car? You know?
Wait, so.
And what's the scenario that you would pick somebody up? It's a twofold, right? Because I feel like it works both ways, like Steph said.
Right. So this murderer, which one was he?
Oh, he was the picker-upper.
Ah.
Yeah. But I mean, back then, are we talking about back then? Hitchhiking was a huge thing in the 60s, 70s. Do you know what I mean? And I'm gonna assume, the freeway kill is also happened in California. So, you know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty sure after like because there was a lot of killings that happened with like hitchhikers, people picking people up. It's in a lot of movies. It's a whole big thing. I think with all this that happened, I think people were just like, you know what? It's enough of this. But yeah, I just wanted to get your guys' idea of like, today, would you hitchhike?
I think it's not as common anymore.
No, for sure not. But I don't know. I feel like in an emergency, would I do it? Yeah. Like Steph said, if like it's freezing cold or I need to get somewhere fast.
And your phone's dead.
Like, yeah, not in somewhere fast, like an emergency or something. Like, I got to be somewhere. Somebody's, unfortunately in the hospital and I'm the only one who can be there or something like that. Yeah, I'll probably get in. Though I'll just be like, at this point, I'd be like, can you just call 911?
Oh, yeah.
And I guess like I wasn't thinking like, hey, can you call 911? If they're like, oh, I don't have a phone, I'd be like, get on your merry way then.
I mean, if they say they don't have a phone, that's really sus.
Yeah, or like, oh, my phone's dead.
This day and age, yeah.
Oh,
their phone's dead too, man.
Yeah, what a surprise.
Yeah, then okay. Yeah, probably. Well, if you're stranded on a road or like a highway or something, that probably means you were driving already and your car broke down or something, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess I would wait by my car. I would try to flag someone down, but I wouldn't ask them for a ride. I'd just be like, like you said, can I use your phone to call some sort of service?
Well, I mean, at this point, right? In this scenario, you've been at the car for an hour, and there's no cars that came by or none that stopped, whatever, because it's night. You know what I mean? And you're like, for some reason, you're in New Mexico.
This happens in New Mexico?
No, it happens in California.
Oh, okay.
But I'm just trying to see, is there a possibility? Because obviously, very few people are hitchhiking now. I think it's just out of necessity. But I feel like I would maybe because I'm from New York, I would just walk to the nearest station or the nearest exit or the nearest whatever, But, that's because I'm from New York. But even like, for example, Steph said that in New Mexico, she was on a road for an hour, didn't see another car. And I'm sure there's not a lot of exits in the, desert of New Mexico.
There are also pockets of New Mexico that just like don't have cell service. So like you can't call like AAA or anything.
So what would you do if you were in there? Like after a certain point, like I'll wait in my car to see, like obviously to see if somebody can stop and I can call. But it's night. You waited for an hour. Person comes up. Hey, can I use your phone? No, it's dead, unfortunately too. Or no, I forgot it at home. But I can take you right up to the nearest gas station. Are you getting?
I guess
I probably would. Yeah. But yeah, it's risky.
And so it's like really rare for other cars to come.
Yes,
right?
I mean you were standing by your car for an hour.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so then you don't have the luxury to see like the car. If there's like multiple people, like if it's a family, then that's more trustworthy.
I feel like I wouldn't trust anything. See, Steph doesn't trust families.
Really? I understand not trusting couples because they could be like partners in crime.
Our family's just a couple.
Yeah, but
two kids.
These are kids.
It could be a really messed up family, Eunice. You ever think about that?
Yeah.
Oh. Perfect. I just feel like I because Steph said she would get in if it was a woman. But then I think in my head, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's a woman do? I mean, at least for me, again, because I'm a guy. What's a woman doing stopping for a guy in the middle of the night?
What?
Like that.
Well, it's in my scenario.
A woman stopping for a woman. Yeah.
But
that's what I'm saying. Like for example, right? The whole thing is like, at least nowadays, women don't trust men in picking them up in a car, right? I'm sure most women wouldn't get into a random guy's car.
Right.
At least I hope so. If you're listening out there, don't get into a random guy's car. But I think the opposite is also true. I wouldn't get into a random woman's car. And obviously, I don't think. Yeah, as a guy, because it's just like if one way is true, then the opposite would also be true. Like a woman would probably not be comfortable putting a random stranger in their car most of the time. So if you're comfortable, I mean, you could be a really nice person, don't get me wrong, but it's just like, will I take that risk? Hell no.
But I mean, I feel like guys also have to watch out for other guys.
No, yeah, well, yeah. I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't get in if it was a woman rather, and I wouldn't get in if it was a guy.
So you.
But I think it's two different reasons.
What if it was like an older woman?
That's even creepier,
like 50s,
you know?
60s. Yeah, but you could overpower.
Oh, really? I can overpower a gun, Steph? I don't think so.
She has both the gun and the car.
And the car. Yeah, that's 10 years ago. I'd be double screwed, Steph. Yeah, I mean, it's just food for thought, you know?
Wait, so that means you don't trust anybody?
No, I wouldn't get into anybody's car. Unless, like I said, unless Steph said it's two dogs and yeah, that's why I brought the puppy thing up. Because, you know, a ridiculous scenario. Not as ridiculous as a ghost, but, you know, a ridiculous scenario of, like, even a puppy I probably wouldn't like. Somebody that I would assume isn't necessarily, like Steph is bringing up, like an older woman, 80 years old. I still wouldn't get in that car. You know? It's just, there's something weird, because I feel like most people wouldn't stop nowadays. Yeah, that's what, I'm just trying to put a comparison of now to back in the 70s and 80s.
Right. Well, like you said, this case probably influenced how people see hitchhiking now.
Well, these are three different people that at one time Californian police thought was one person, and they were all termed sort of freeway killers. You know, in fact, some of their kills also, you can't really, nobody doesn't really have a claim to any one of them. It's like it could be either of the three, which is crazy. All right.
Yeah. Well, okay, think about it this way. If you were held captive for a while and then you managed to escape, and obviously like your first instinct is to find someone to like help you, like then you wouldn't be picky, right? You you wouldn't care about gender.
All right, we're gonna assume
age.
cell phones don't exist, because I feel like I would just tell them to call the cops, you know. And if they don't, it's weird. But let's just say cell phones don't exist. I don't know. I feel like, how far can I get on foot? You know, let's say I've been captured, held in someone's basement or barn or whatever. You know, how far am I away from somebody? Obviously, they're either, not that these people are in on it, right? But, you know, what if it's his cousin that's coming to visit him for some reason? You know what I mean? I'd be wary of anybody, you know? Or like, let's say you get out and there's a neighbor. The neighbor didn't hear me scream for like 75 hours. Like, there's soundproofing, but there's no like perfect soundproofed off like place. You would think that the neighbor would be able to hear me, so I'd be a little suspicious of the neighbor. Like, would I run to the neighbor? No.
So many neighbors that don't hear what's going on in other people's stuff.
No, I know. I mean, I guess if I'm frantic, I don't think I'd be thinking too much, just that I have to get away. You know, I can't put myself in that situation because it's just so unimaginable. But I feel like I'd be wary of everybody. Like, why didn't the neighbor hear me? I've been screaming for, 2 days, whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm just kind of comparing that to being like stranded in the desert. And,
yeah,
like,
I mean,
you need help.
Yeah, if I'm stranded somewhere like in the desert, I feel like, barring severe scenarios where I might die, then I have a better shot of this person helping me than me out in the, like, if I'm in the Arctic and I have short shorts on for some reason, yeah, I'm getting into the first car I can. You know, if I'm in the desert and it's like boiling hot and I'm seeing ghosts, yeah, I'm getting in the car because there's something wrong, you know? All right. So this episode's kind of a little bit more darker than usual. Not that all murder isn't dark, but this one kind of, just strap in. All right. So we're going to begin. William George Bonin, born January 8th, 1947, died February 23rd, 1996, was known as the Freeway Killer, American serial killer. Crazy part, twice paroled sex offender. And he committed the rape, torture, and murder of a minimum of 21 boys and young men in a series of killings between 1979 and 1980 in Southern California. He was also suspected of committing 15 murders. And during the trial, the prosecutor said that he was the most arch-evil person who ever existed. He was convicted to 14 of the murders linked to the Freeway Killer in 2 separate trials in 1982 and 1983. Just a quick overview. He spent 14 years on death row before he was executed by lethal injection in 1996 on February 23rd. He's known as a freeway killer because majority of his victims' bodies were discovered alongside freeways in Southern California. And again, like I said, he shares this with 2 other unrelated serial killers, Patrick Kearney and Randy Kraft. Now, I'm just going to go through his early childhood because now for serial killers, a lot of it is people would say mental, starting in childhood. So this is one of those cases where you can make that case of how he was treated as a child, how he grew up. He also went to the military later on, so it's strapping. Okay, so William Bonin was born in Wilmington, Kentucky. Oh, sorry, I apologize. William Bonin was born in Willimantic, Connecticut on January 8th, 1947. He has two other brothers, and his parents, Robert and Alice Bonin, were alcoholics. His father was a gambler, and he was physically abusive to not only his wife, but the children. They were always neglected as children, and a lot of neighbors would often feed them and give them clothing because they would see they were in a bad position. So, not really wearing enough clothing, shoes kind of destroyed, and so the neighbors would kind of help out in that kind of sense. So, in one time, the brothers were often placed in the care of their grandfather just because the mother and father were kind of incapable, being alcoholics and having their issues, especially with the father being physically abusive. But their grandfather was a convicted child molester who molested Bonin's mother when she was a child and adolescent, and sexually abused all three grandsons. So Bonin and his William and his two brothers. It really gets worse from here, at least for Bonin. I mean, again, we just have to remember that he was convicted on killing 21 boys, essentially. So just put that in the back of your mind as well. But yeah, it's not a great childhood. In 1953, Bonin's mother placed her sons in an orphanage, obviously to protect it. Which is crazy because it says here to only protect from the father's physical violence, even though, she was sexually abused by her own father. She would still, I think the grandfather was still around to take care of the children. So all three children were put into a orphanage, but this orphanage was also terrible. It severely disciplined children. It would, administer beatings. It would put the kids in stress positions here, and this is basically waterboarding. So they would fill up a sink and partially drown the children. And then he was later interviewed about, obviously his childhood, because, at that time, psychologists wanted to know what makes a serial killer kind of tick, sort of situation. Mm-hmm. He discussed many aspects of it, but he refused to discuss memories of the orphanage at all. So he refused to discuss. The only thing that he would give up about the orphanage was that he consented to sexual advances from older men, but only if they would tie his hands behind his back first. That's what he asked for. That's what he said he asked for. He remained at the orphanage until the age of 9, and then he was returned to his parents. So as you can see, terrible situation, terrible childhood, terrible grandfather, terrible, beating your children in that kind of a sense. It's just a terrible situation all along. And then to be put to your grandfather, who was a known child molester, convicted child molester, molested his own daughter, essentially. Terrible situation. Then put to an orphanage where, again, abuse is continuously put on. Like, I can't even imagine, So now we're at the age of 10. And
so the grandpa's a convicted child molester. Was he convicted because he was caught molesting his own daughter, or were there other children?
So I'm assuming he was convicted molesting his own daughter. It doesn't really say, just that he's a convicted child molester. I'll get to the end and go back, but
okay. Well,
he definitely molested Bonin's mother. And so in 1953, they were placed into the orphanage. And he was.
So we're in the 50s. Yeah,
so he was born in 1947. Mm-hmm. So in 1953, he was put in the orphanage, and he stayed in the orphanage for what was it? 3, 6. He stayed in the orphanage for 4 years. Oh, I'm sorry, until the age of 9, so 3 years. And at the age of 10, this is a year after he came back from the orphanage, Bonin was arrested for stealing vehicle license plates and was placed in a juvenile detention center. And again, at the juvenile detention center, he was repeatedly physically and sexually abused by several people, including his own adult counselor. So this is like, it's just like, again, we'll discuss this later on of like, right? Like this is gonna completely mess up William Bonin. You know what I mean? Right. Just mentally, it has to. Not that, I'm sure people who survived this and, didn't become serial killers, but, but just mentally you have to think. But essentially...
Like, how can you trust anyone?
Yeah.
Your worldview so messed up because, like, everywhere you turn is predator after.
I mean, you have your own, your father beats you. Your mother's an alcoholic. It doesn't say anything bad about the mother, but the mother put them to the grandfather, knowing that, she was molested. Maybe she thought, oh, just because I'm a girl, these are all boys. I can't, Maybe she thought she was doing well for her children, specifically since the father would beat them severely. And they really wouldn't be fed. Abused by your grandfather. So every step of the way, right? So far. And then put into an orphanage because of how terrible everything is. That the mother put you in an orphanage where they would, again, put you in stress positions, beat you, essentially waterboard you or, partially drown you. And then, he says that he consented to the sexual advances from the older men that were at the orphanage.
That's still like statute.
No, 100%. Yeah, but just like, come on, like that's got to destroy you, man. Like the fact that he consented to it and said only if you tie my hands behind my back first has to tell you something.
He must just think that that's what happens everywhere you go. He got like sexually abused at every stage.
Yeah.
So he must think this is just how the world works.
Yeah. There's nothing I can say except for God. Anyway, yeah. So again, 4 years in the detention center, sexually abused by several people, including his own adult counselor. Bonin's parents relocated to California, and then shortly afterwards, Bonin's father died from cirrhosis of the liver. And then it's stated that while here, Bonin is known to have molested his younger brother and several neighborhood children in California. And he would do this by luring them. Yeah. So William. So at the age of around 14.
His younger brother? Is it the same brother that he's been with? And also okay. Well, that's great for the brother.
It's just like you probably assume. No, I don't want to say you can probably assume, but my assumption is, right, like, I don't think he saw it as like, I don't know. I can't put anything in it, right? Maybe he didn't see it as molestation and more like, oh, this is what we did as children. Like, this is what the older people do to younger boys,
Right, yeah. Like,
kind of situation.
Now, as he gets older, I guess now he's like, oh, it's my turn to do this.
Yes, that's what I'm going to assume.
Yeah.
But we'll get to this later, right? So he would do this by, he would promise, because it was also several neighborhood children. He would do this by telling, younger children, oh, come over to my place, I have alcohol, and stuff and that's how he would bring them over, have them drink, and then molest them there. He's known to also commit robbery, theft, petty theft, and grand theft in his teenage years. So, pretty terrible upbringing, pretty terrible situation. But I don't want to blame it for, the reasoning of what he becomes, but I would say it definitely has to do a part of what he becomes later on in the future. Anyway, after this, he joins the Air Force after high school, and he's engaged to marry. The reason why he was engaged to marry this person was because of his mother. So father has passed away because of cirrhosis of the liver, and his mother, who basically set up this entire marriage, was because she wanted to sort of suppress her son's homosexuality. And so anyway, he joins the Air Force, the U.S. Air Force. He served 5 months of active duty in Vietnam War. And Bonin later says that it was in Vietnam where he sort of, it instilled the belief of him that human life was kind of worthless. So again, this is like, I don't want to say stereotypical because this is, not the typical situation, but, stereotypical serial killer, like background of abused as a child, went into the Air Force, saw life as like sort of meaningless. I'm assuming of the many people that he killed because he was a gunman, an aerial gunner. But yeah, while he was also in the army, he did save someone's life, a wounded airman. And for that, he received a Medal of Recognition for his gallantry. But then he later says that he had consensual sexual relations with people, with males and females in Vietnam. He also admitted to sexually assaulting 2 soldiers at gunpoint during the period of an offense. And so he was served 3 years in the Air Force, and he received an honorable discharge, which to me is insane, in October 1968. And afterwards, he returned to his mom, and, his mom still pushed for the marriage, so he got married to his fiancée, but then they divorced, like, right afterwards, essentially. Okay, so remember I told you that he was a twice convicted sexual offender. So we're going to go through his first conviction. So on November 17th, in 1968, at the age of 21, Bonin committed a sexual assault on a youth. He was to commit 3 further sexual assaults on boys and youths for the next 4 months. And the victims of these 4 assaults were aged between 12 and 18. And again, in each instance, he would bound or restrain before forcibly engaging in sodomy and oral copulation. He would also torture them, which includes bludgeoning and squeezing of the victim's testicles.
Oh.
Yeah, I told you, this is it. It's only going to get darker and darker. So this was in 1968, and then in early 1969, he was arrested because he attempted to restrain a 16-year-old boy who lured in his vehicle, and so then they charged him on all basically the four boys in the beginning, and the one that he got caught for, the 16-year-old who was caught in his vehicle. So it was 5 counts of kidnapping, 4 counts of sodomy, 1 count of oral copulation, 1 count of child molestation against all 5 youths that he had abducted and assaulted. And in the final youth that he had abducted, he attempted to assault since the previous November. He pled guilty to molestation and forced oral copulation and was sentenced to Atascadero State Hospital for the mentally disordered, and he was considered a sexual offender. And they said that he was able to be treated in the state hospital. Okay, so here we're gonna go in the house.
And these crimes were
all of his crimes so far have been committed in California. I mean, besides the molestation of probably the brothers and stuff. But I think they had moved to California at that time. But I'm assuming that the molestation just didn't start in California. But that's where it says it's stated.
How long was his sentence?
Oh, we're gonna get into it. But while he was at the hospital, he was put into a psychiatric examination, and it revealed he had an IQ. Guess the IQ.
Really high?
Do you know what the average IQ is?
No.
Okay. Well, I think it's 100, but I'm gonna look up average IQ. Yeah, so between 90 and 109 is average. So the highest is above between 130 and 144. Anything at that level and above is gifted or very advanced, according to this. So what do you think his IQ was?
130?
Steph?
Yeah.
Pretty close. 121.
Okay.
And they also said that he displayed traits of manic depression and that he had damage to his prefrontal cortex.
Oh,
and
from abuse?
One would assume it would be abuse. Don't forget that he would be beat by his dad consistently, severely. Abused by his grandfather. I'm assuming also beat by his grandfather, but it doesn't mention it. But I'm just going to assume. Beat, drowned in the orphanage.
Mm-hmm.
They don't say where the damage comes from, but you have to assume it's somewhere when he was younger. And so damage to the prefrontal cortex is what they say is likely to reduce an ability to restrain any violent impulses.
Mm-hmm. That like controls your inhibition, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Basically, yeah.
Self-control comes.
Yeah, that's right. So his physical examination also revealed that he had extensive scars on his head, which I'm going to assume is where the damage for the prefrontal cortex came from, and his buttocks. Mm-hmm. And they said that it was sustained in the 3 years that he had been housed at the juvenile detention center. He says he has no memory of any incidents of abuse in the detention center at all. But we know that he was, he doesn't call it abuse, but he was raped, statutory raped by at least some of the people in the detention center, including his own counselor. So it's weird that he would say that he has no memory of any abuse. Maybe he doesn't put it as abuse. Anyway, 2 years after the arrival in the state hospital, he was sent to prison because they declared that he was unsuitable for any other treatment, only because, again, he would engage in forceful sexual activities with all the male inmates there at the hospital. So they had to put him back to prison, right? 2 years after he went into the hospital. And he went into the hospital in 1971, right? So then 2 years later, in 1973, he was put back into the prison. And now I'm just going to tell you this. On June 11th, 1974, he was released from prison after doctors concluded he was no longer a danger to the health and safety of others.
Oh.
So that's his first conviction.
But how? But was he just on good behavior in the prison in the last 2 years?
It's not even the last 2 years. So he, just to go down the timeline one more time, he was sentenced to the hospital for the mentally disordered as a sexual offender in January 1971. 2 years afterwards, after his arrival, he was sent to prison. So 2 years after 1971 would be 1973. And on June 11th, 1974, literally a year later, he was released from prison. Yeah.
But why?
And the reason why he was put in the prison was because he repeatedly engaged in forceful sexual activity with male inmates.
Right.
So you would assume that this forceful sexual activity would continue in prison, but maybe it didn't, because I would assume there's a bit of a difference between prisoners and people in a mental institution. But I think that's insanity, because it's not like they brought him into the prison because of how much of a danger he was in the hospital. I just can't believe a year later that they said, yeah, no longer a danger to health and safety of others. And these were doctors that concluded this.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
That was in June.
I don't know, maybe he just figured out how to.
I mean,
behave,
again,
basically.
Only 1 year.
IQ of 121, right?
Yeah.
So not that I put too much, breath in IQ tests. I don't think they're the end all be all, but obviously somewhat of a bright man.
Was he very charming, or
I don't know because it doesn't necessarily say because just from everything that's here, I have to look at I don't really look at interviews between other people just because I don't want to get into personal people's lives. I kind of just want to focus mostly on the murderer, not nearly the victims or anything like that. Just because it's just like they've moved on, the victims, or they try to move on the victims. And I don't want to bring back light to those people. Though one could argue that bringing light to William Bonin could bring everything open again, but that's not the intention. The intention is just to explain, like, that there's more murderers than you would think, and why, for example, in this case, why like hitchhiking started becoming less and less of a thing after the 80s. But anyway, so he was released in June 11th, 1974, and then on September 8th, 1974, this is basically his second time. Bonin encountered a 14-year-old hitchhiking. Now I'm going to say the name of this victim only because later on in 2011, this victim kind of talks about the situation. He encountered a 14-year-old named David Allen McVicker hitchhiking in Garden Grove, and McVicker accepted Bonin's offer to drive him home to his parents in Huntington Beach. And after McVicker had entered Bonin's vehicle, Bonin asked him if he was gay. And so then McVicker asked Bonin to stop the car, and that's when Bonin pulled out a gun and drove him to a deserted field where he ordered McVicker to undress, then beat him and raped him. After beating and assaulting McVicker, he began to strangle him with his own t-shirt, and then immediately became apologetic when McVicker began screaming. He drove him home and then said to him, quote, "We'll meet again." So McVicker obviously told his mom about the rape. She notified Garden Grove police, and then Bonin was charged with rape and forcible oral copulation of a minor and the attempted abduction of a 15-year-old, which had occurred 2 days after Bonin had assaulted McVicker. So 2 days later, so in that instance, Bonin had 2 days after McVicker, he sexually propositioned a 15-year-old who rejected his offer of $35 for sex. And so in response to the 15-year-old rejecting his offer, he was going to run him over with his car. So those are the two charges that he was put on: his assault on McVicker and his sexual proposition of a 15-year-old boy. He pled guilty to those charges in December 31st, 1975, and he was sentenced to serve between 1 and 15 years at a California men's facility in San Luis Obispo. He was later released on October 11th, 1978, so basically 3 years later, with an 18-month supervised probation.
Why? Like, why do they keep releasing him?
I don't understand. I really don't understand it. Right?
Wow.
Because later on, McVicker is going to come out and talk about the situation and how it obviously just fucked up his entire life. He said afterwards he couldn't hold a job. He dropped out of high school, and then he hurt his back, and he was asking like for people to help him out essentially. And I don't know if he needs help now, but I'll look into it to see if he has any way for him to get donations or anything like that. And if anybody who hears is going to help out, I think if he does, I'll donate a little bit of money, just because, my God, and this is just one instance, 14 years old, terrible instance, and it ruined this person's life. So I'm really sorry for McVicker.
Yeah, that's traumatic.
Yeah, so literally 3 years, and not even 3 years. He was sentenced on December 31st, 1975, and released on October 11th, 1978. Not even a full 3 years. But this time, with a prior record. And again, attempted murder, twice. You would assume that they would try to charge him for attempted murder, trying to run somebody over.
Yeah, and at this point, it's like 7 people total that they have charged him with, right? Because
yes,
the first
5.
case was like 4, and then it was the the 5th person, and then this time it's like 2 more people. It's like total 7.
Yes,
and they still just let him go.
This time
years.
With 18 months supervised probation.
It's crazy.
Now it's become known after this that he said to himself, this is what he says, that after this he never wanted to get caught again. Mm-hmm. Or no, sorry, he says he never wanted to go to prison again, rather. So what does that mean? Do you think that he's going to stop? Of course not. That just means that instead of keeping them alive, unfortunately, he was going to murder them. All right. Now, I've kind of buried the lead here, but he did not do these crimes alone. He had many of accomplices during the killings, which is a twist, right? So now I'm going to sort of explain his acquaintance with one of the later accomplices. So one of the accomplices was a man named Vernon Butts. I would make a joke here, but being in the situation that we're in, I think the name speaks for itself. Okay, so after his release in October 11th, 1978, he moved back into an apartment complex in Downey, which is 1 mile from his mother's home, and he found employment as a truck driver. I'm not going to name the company that employed him, just because I really do think people who actually do come out of prison reformed and have done their time should find employment. I believe that you got to live with with what you've done, obviously, and I don't think he should have been released to begin with, but I think people who have done their time and atone for their sin, feel remorse, I don't think they should be, depending on the crime, I don't think they should be penalized for their entire life, and I think they should be able to find work. Anyway, so during this time, he established a reputation among teenage boys that he's very affable, sociable. You can come in, drink. Bonin was a great guy. You're a teenage guy. You want to get some drinks, hang out, have a good time. Bonin's place would be the place to hang out. At the time, also, Bonin dated a young woman.
Oh.
He would go roller skating with her. And remember, this is 1 mile away from his mother. I'm going to assume that the young woman was another matchup with his mother. Though it doesn't say, I'm just going to assume, based on the first marriage, that his mother still wanted to kind of force him from being, a gay man, essentially, living his own life. So I'm assuming he would date her.
Don't people know that he's a sex offender?
Well, I have to check. Let me check this real quick. I need to see, when did they do the sex?
That mandatory thing.
Yeah, offender registry. When did sex offender registry begin? 1995, July 25th, 1995.
Oh, okay.
So I'm assuming
people probably did not.
Yeah. So between 1994 and 1995. So I'm assuming people didn't know, but you would think maybe it came around town, but apparently not. Anyway, shortly after moving, Bonin became acquainted with a 43-year-old neighbor named Everett Frazier, and then he became a regular attendee of Frazier's parties that he would hold in these apartments. And that's where he met 21-year-old Vernon Butts, 18-year-old Gregory Miley. So Butts was a porcelain factory worker and a part-time musician who had a fascination with occultism, and he would later state that he was both fascinated and terrified by Bonin, while also admitting that he took delight in watching Bonin abuse and torture his victims. So, terrible guy already. And then Miley was an illiterate Texas native with an IQ of 56, and he supported himself with casual work and also participated in the murders he accompanied Bonin upon. Now, I'm just gonna just ruin the surprise, not the surprise, but they were all essentially went to prison for this later on. I kind of assume that Miley was sort of tricked, just because he seems to be has a lower IQ, probably easily swayed, and didn't understand. Because later on, we'll get to it when we go later on. But yeah, so he had accomplices.
And he was.
Yes, when he met him, 18-year-old Gregory Miley.
Barely an adult.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what an IQ of 56, if that would mean. Let me see if that means that person is capable of living on. I mean, obviously he's capable of living on his own because he does.
Right, but yeah, at a certain point, considered mentally disabled.
Yeah.
Or mentally challenged. I think I'm disabled.
Yeah. So yeah, at this point he probably had like I would assume. Hold on, let me just look through these qualifications. Yeah, so 69 and below is extremely low.
Mm-hmm.
So I would assume he was. I mean, you can make the assumption that he was probably not mentally capable of like understanding everything. Anyway, still terrible things that happened. Still should be charged.
Mm.
But again, I think I personally think he was manipulated. But let's get into the murder sprees. So Bonin picked male hitchhikers, schoolboys, and the occasional male prostitute as his victims. They were aged between 12 to 19, and they were either enticed or forced into his van. And the van that he had was a Ford Econoline. I don't know how to say that word. Econoline van.
I don't know what that is.
I've never heard of this van before. And they were overpowered and bound hand and foot with a combination of handcuffs, wires, and cords. Now this goes back again to the part, remember when he was in the orphanage and he said that he had consensual sex, but he asked them to tie his hands behind his back. So I think this is also another fascination. My personal opinion, I think he had that as a child, and then he grew up and he sort of wanted to pass that. Oh, now that I'm grown, I can do this to children. So these victims were sexually assaulted, beaten in the face, head, genitals, tortured before they were killed and strangled by their own t-shirts, usually some of the times. There's other deaths. There were stabbings, battered to death. People were forced to drink hydrochloric acid. Some victims had ice picks driven in their ears.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's pretty dark, like I said. And one of their victims died of shock. So in the car, he had removed all the handles, like the inner handles to get out of a car in the passenger side and rear.
Oh, I was just surprised that they like configured the car that way.
He had removed basically any door handle to open up any doors except for his side. He also hid registers, knives, household tools, and other instruments for use of bounding and torture. The victims were usually killed inside of the van, and then this is why he's known as a freeway killer. They would be discarded alongside the freeway in Southern California. He's for sure known to have killed 12 people, and he's had between 1 to 4 accomplices throughout the time. And they sort of, a lot of psychologists say that his killings sort of show that he's like a drug addict that requires an even greater increase to attain, satisfactory level of euphoria. And he later says to neurologists that he had felt an intense sense of excitement as he searched for his victim. Again, I think that has to do with a mixture of his upbringing, sort of the abuse that happened to him, also the damage that was in his frontal cortex. All right, now we're just going to go through sort of the murder timeline. Okay, so the first murder that he was charged for was for a 13-year-old hitchhiker, which was last seen leaving his parents' house at 10:50 in the morning in May 28th, 1979. His body, which was found with only a t-shirt, shoes, and socks, was found on the same afternoon. So that means he was picked up in the morning. An autopsy revealed that he had suffered emasculation and bludgeoning to his face and his head, with his skull sustaining multiple fractures. Also, the youth had been slashed across the throat, stabbed, and strangled to death. His underwear, jeans, and severed genitals were discovered in the field close to his body. In this murder, Bonin was assisted by Butts, who they suspect was assisting Bonin in at least 8 of the murders. So that was in May 28th, 1979. In mid-1979, Bonin was arrested again for molesting a 17-year-old boy. He was still in parole. Remember, he had 18 months of parole. And this was a violation of his conditions of parole, which meant that he would return to prison. But, believe it or not, as twisted and messed up as this story is, due to an administrative error committed prior to Bonin's scheduled court date, it resulted in his release. And Frazier, remember that the neighbor that used to throw the parties, picked up Bonin from Orange County Jail where he had been incarcerated. And he said in a statement, "No one's going to testify again. This is never going to happen to me again."
Oh my gosh.
This is after he had murdered one person already, 13-year-old, and he was caught for molesting a 17-year-old boy essentially 3 months later after that murder. He hadn't been caught for that murder, but the murder had happened in May 28th, 1979, and then in mid-1979, he was arrested again, but left due to an administrative error. That's insanity to me.
Yeah. I feel like he's learning all the wrong lessons.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Crazy.
Like, yeah, his lesson, like, his reaction to all that is just, oh man, I gotta not get caught again. Because the justice system keeps failing, and yeah, and just like how he grew up in that circle of abuse.
I mean, yeah, consistent abuse at least for 10 years, where then he becomes an abuser later on.
So he thinks the world is full of predators like him, and it's not a matter of right versus wrong, it's a matter of do you get caught or not get caught.
Yeah, because you have to assume, right, all those people didn't get caught that were abusing him, right? At least from what I can tell.
So for him, he's just like, oh, it's so unfair.
Yeah.
And when he is caught, he's not properly punished or properly taught. I
mean, he in the hospital where they supposedly were treating him, he continuously sexually attacks other men in the hospital. I mean, it doesn't mention if he did that in the jail, but you gotta assume that he did.
I mean,
that's just my assumption.
I think what's like unfortunate about mental asylums and mental hospitals is that I feel like, yeah, there's these institutions where they try to help people with these mental problems, but because there's just so many patients, I feel like there's like a lot of malpractice that still goes on, or just like a lot of methods they use to try to do like a one fix for like, I don't know what I'm saying, one solution for all problems kind of strategy.
Like electroshock therapy, we would say. Right?
Yeah, or like give everyone the same medication, something like that. It just doesn't work. So
I mean, you also have to remember the time, 1970s. Not a very gay friendly United States, I would assume.
Yeah.
I think at that time too that homosexuality they said was probably a mental issue. People believed that back then, that it was a mental issue. So I'm assuming that maybe they were treating quote unquote for his for his homosexuality. So maybe they weren't even trying to go at it from the route of he's a sexual rapist, but more of like, oh, what's wrong with him is his homosexuality. It could be also,
right.
So I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know the doctors or the hospital situation, but 1979, not a great time to Americans didn't really support gay rights. Or they not that they're supported 100% now, but at least it's much better now than it was then, and it can hopefully even get better in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was definitely the mom's approach. It seems like she was just like, well, as long as he has a girlfriend, then all his perversions for men will be solved.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, his homosexuality is probably to blame for the fact that he assaults men.
Yeah. Again, and so just to go back real quick, so Fraser says there's a time when Bonin says no one's going to testify again. This is never going to happen to me again. Fraser said this is what he states, that he assumed that at this time that he was expressing remorse for what was going on, but little did we know.
Steph, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting to see how he kind of escalated. I'm surprised he was able to find help or like accomplices so easily in his life.
How did he recruit them?
Yeah. At first I thought Mo was gonna mention that they were like victims or like previous victims, and he kind of like manipulated them, but now they're just like people in his life.
Yeah, maybe we can ask him how that happened. But yeah, that's a good point. I also assumed they were gonna be victims, but it seemed like they just, especially Vernon Butts, it seemed like he just wanted to join in on the.
Yeah, so they again, when he went after he was released from prison the second time, he moved into an apartment complex, and Fraser, which is the neighbor, threw these parties. But at the time, Bonin would also have like all these boys just come over, like teenage boys, give him alcohol, and he was known as like sort of what they would say a cool, chill person. And he had a girlfriend. He would go rollerblading with her. You know what I mean? And Fraser was his neighbor, would throw a lot of parties, and in those parties is where he met Butts and Miley.
But how did he convince them to help him murder?
Well, it seems like Butts had a fascination.
Right. But I can't imagine him just striking up that conversation.
I'm assuming, I mean, I can't. They don't really, go in too much into detail, but later on, one of them does testify against them.
Okay. But yeah, so far, I feel really bad for not just the victims, but I feel really bad for Bonin as we're hearing his life story. But I also feel bad for feeling bad for him, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to justify it.
It's just because you've had a shitty upbringing doesn't excuse.
Yeah, for sure.
Like these terrible crimes.
His brothers didn't do the same thing. But at the same time, I can't help but just like understand how he came to be this way. Especially because he's so smart. I feel like smart people, I mean, maybe I'm just pulling this out of my butt, but I feel like smart people in particular refuse to just get tossed around by the rest of the world. Like, smart people try to adapt and like learn how to get ahead. And so if a smart person is raised to think in this world, it's either, you get molested or you molest. It's that kind of world. Then he gets good at it, I guess. So I feel really bad for him. I think this is the first time I sympathized.
It's also like, I forget where I heard this, but it's like the idea that like predators can like sense like who would be like a victim that would like who would be a good victim, like they come from like an abusive household and they don't really have a support system, and they've been like moved around a lot, and he really like fits that bill.
Yeah, the abusive relationship dynamic is all he knows. So that's all he can like. Those are the only kind of relationships he can foster, and I guess those are the only relationships he can look out for. That really sucks. Yeah. I don't know. Hearing his story makes me feel lucky that I didn't grow up in his kind of environment, because I can't imagine what my mindset would be if my own family sexually abuses me, and then I guess my mom makes me feel bad about my sexuality. It's like it wasn't even his choice, his sexuality. Not that homosexuality is wrong in any way, but you know what I mean? Like relationships with older men, between older men and young boys, is all he knew. And then his mom is like making him feel bad for it, or trying to make him feel bad for it. But then everywhere he goes, it's the same exact thing over and over again. And what's really weird is that relationships between like older men and like young men has like exist like that for like forever, since ancient Greece times.
Oh yeah. The apprentices of like the commanders in the army would essentially sleep with the boys.
Oh, I didn't know that was like prevalent in the army.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Right, but yeah,
well, not 100%, but that's what they say.
I was thinking of like like famous philosophers, and they always had their young boyfriend. It was totally normal in like ancient Greece times.
I don't think that's the situation that's going on, because I feel like, in the 70s, even in the 1900s, homosexuality was like frowned upon, tried, basically destroyed. Even now in large parts of the world, that still villainized if you're gay, which is crazy, but it still happens now. So I think this is just a situation of a scenario of, this happened to me when I'm young. Now that I'm older, I can do it to the young, right? And then it escalated to, well, I don't want to get caught, so I'm just going to kill, because I don't want to be caught.
No, I agree. I'm just saying. I guess it's like weird to think about how. Well, I think even before society recognized pedophilia was bad, like even before that, the fact that there's always been relationships between older men and young men, that's always been abusive.
Yeah.
And it's just like this abusive behavior has been around since, start of human civilization, and it keeps happening to this day. It's so weird.
Yeah. I mean, not to go to the animalistic world, right? One way to show dominance in some animals is to, sexually attack them. Or one way to show, I give up, is to offer sexual favors, even to men sometimes. And so, I'm not going to liken it to, to that, but one could take that and sort of extrapolate it to humanity, sort of in a sort of way, specifically like back when civilization first started, human civilization.
Yeah, it's sad because it's kind of like a natural behavior, but it's it's really sick. I mean, now we know how much damage it does to like young boys, young children.
Well, yeah, I was talking about like homosexuality between two animals in a sense of like, a weakness to strength kind of situation. And in this situation, even if it was consenting and the two people were old enough, right? This happens all the time in workplaces, right? Where a boss sort of puts sexual pressure on a worker that they manage, for example. Do you know what I mean? I feel if you come at it from that sort of point, it's very. I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen that two people fall in love, but it's very. I don't want to say predatory, but it's on the line. You skirt that line, If your manager is like flirting with a worker, I don't know about that, because there's a position of power put in place just in the back of the mind, without even just implicit. There's power politics there. So this is obviously an extension of that, and a billion times over. But geez,
yeah.
At first, sorry, go ahead.
No. Sorry, I was gonna interrupt you, but go ahead.
I was just gonna say, at first you kind of feel bad for William Bonin about what happened, and then as you go on and on and on and on, right? You can sort of make reasons why, not excuses, but you can reason why he is the way he is. For example, my dog is still here again. What?
Didn't you walk her?
Yeah, she went. She peed.
She has to do more.
Not enough walking. Yeah, you were gone for like a minute.
Yeah, that was a quick walk.
Yeah, I just wanted to be as quick as possible. But obviously my needy dog needs more.
This is what it's like to have a dog who's alive.
Yeah, unlike Eunice's dog. This is where the ghost puppy comes from, huh? Your dog is a ghost dog.
I already told you guys, right, that like when I'm at my parents' house, I wake up in the middle of night and I go to my dog and I shake him awake just to make sure he's not dead.
Yes. Every single picture, for people who don't know, every single picture that Eunice is in with her dog looks like it's been like just in a state of death for like days. Doesn't move.
He has a resting tired
dead face. He has a resting dead face.
Tired face.
And then there would be pictures of him all.
I feel like I have that.
Right?
So
Steph, every single time somebody comes in, you takes a picture. You're basically in a state of death. I think I'm gonna have to walk my dog a little bit longer. But what I was gonna say was, all right. I think Amy wants me to get into the car, so I gotta go.
Okay. Wait, like go.
Do you guys want to?
You want to do a part 2 next time?
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay.
Yeah, because we haven't even gotten to the. The real what.
Okay,
what
we'll
about,
do this as a 2-parter then.
Wait, but I had a point I wanted to say.
Okay, go ahead.
Can Amy wait or no?
Yes, as long as I'm standing, she can wait.
Okay. I wrote it down. Hold on, I gotta find it.
Oh man.
Okay, you know how you kept emphasizing that Bonin wanted to bind his victims and that he himself wanted to be bound as a kid?
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting, and I wondered if, as a kid, he wanted to be bound because he could justify it to himself. Like, he could justify the molestation to himself if he was bound, so that he could be like, oh, well, I couldn't do anything because I was tied up. So this was kind of out of my hands.
Well, maybe, right? I can see that as in a sort of way, but maybe also like we don't know how he was sort of molested with his grandfather. You know what I mean? Maybe that's how his grandfather did. Maybe you're right with the bound thing. I mean, like we can go a million ways about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just thinking that because how you were saying his mom kind of wanted to dissuade his homosexuality.
Yeah.
And constantly like recommend girls to him. I wonder if
we don't know if the second girlfriend is from his mother. I just assumed that because his first wife and his fiance was from his mother.
Right. So he definitely grew up in an environment. I mean, also it was the 70s, but like he grew up in an environment where homosexuality was really frowned upon.
Yes.
And then so I wonder if he voluntarily wanted to be bound so that he could just kind of mentally justify it to himself, like, oh, I'm not weird. I'm not like crazy. It's like this is something I can't control.
You're putting it as like a mental way out, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm the one who was attacked. But I can also put it as a gratification of attacking, right? Because he consented, but he wanted it to feel like he didn't consent.
Yeah.
You can go the other route too. Of he liked the fact that it felt as if he was being attacked. He liked the attacking of it. Right, and then later on, he does admit that he loves he's exhilarated with the search,
like
of finding of finding the next victim.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I think he was really into this like idea of predator and prey.
Yeah, that's why I can't say that it was a way for him. I think this was a way to sort of. I would say it's probably more of a way to sort of please his sexual fantasies than it is a way of saying, oh, well, I had no involvement kind of thing. Because later on, he does attack inmates. He does attack people at the hospital.
Yeah, no, but I don't know. I think like the justification and the fact that he got pleasure from it can still go hand in hand.
Maybe he was younger, right? So you would assume he's on being attacked phase. But I don't know. I mean, we can talk about this all night long, but I personally don't. I put more stock into the fact that he liked I think of a sexual way than more of a even though, to talk about a 10-year-old thinking of that in a sexual way is kind of weird, but.
Yeah, well, I guess to kind of combine those 2 points, what I'm saying is even as a 10-year-old, he didn't think consensual sex was fun. It was more fun if one person was bound, almost like against their will, and then the other person was attacking them.
I see. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Steph, what do you think?
Yeah. I could see it being like a
a
kink. I could also see it just being or something more representative of like power and control.
I mean, I just as hard as it is for me to say for a 10-year-old in this situation, I'm more inclined that it's a sexual gratification thing than it was a. I mean, it could be the gratification of like, oh, I had no control over it kind of situation. It could be a combination, you know. But I think it's more sexual than it was anything else. That's my personal opinion of it.
No, I mean, I think you're right. I just think it just really shows his sexual education as a 10-year-old that he thinks.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy that he was 10 years old.
That sex is better when one person's unwilling,
even if it's fake.
Sexual. Yeah, exactly. Like he needed to be bound.
Yeah, he needed to be basically taken advantage of.
Yeah, that's terrible. That's what he learned.
Yeah. I mean, as a child, I would say it's terrible. You know, if you're a grown adult with another grown adult, perfectly fine.
And it's a kink.
I'm all for it. My kink is other people's kinks. So please let me know what your kinks are.
Whoa.
Send an email to
Eunice, put in our email here when we finally figure it out.
No, Steph should put down her email. She's marketing.
No, we're gonna make a podcast email. And Steph, as leader of marketing,
guys, I'm disconnected.
Steph throws her computer outside of her window. What?
Oh my gosh, my computer broke. I can't check my email.
Guys, I gotta tell you something, and this will be the end of the podcast. But I've been watching a lot of Dragon's Den, as you know, and they always say like when they're out of something, like they don't want to invest, they're like, for this reason I'm out. And I feel like Steph consistently not showing up to important meetings that she's supposed to be in the lead of as leader of marketing, and for that reason I'm out.
Given that show over,
I don't know. I feel I like the British aspect of it, you know? Not that they're all British. They're not all British in there. Yeah. If you're British.
Wait, no, like, the British hate us, remember?
Oh, fuck, yeah. The royal family hates us.
You lost that.
You know.
Well, don't British people love the royal family?
Not all British people, you know?
I thought you were going for the Irish.
You have to assume. Let me ask you a question. You think every single British person in the United Kingdom loves the Queen and the royal family?
Every single British person? No.
Yeah, there's got to be somebody out there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a waste of tax.
All right, I gotta go. Goodbye.
Okay. Goodbye.
Amy says goodbye as well. And we'll see you all next time for the continuation of the Freeway Killer Murder. I thought it was going to be a 3-part. Looks like it's going to be a 6-parter. You know what I mean?
Oh, man.
But yeah, hopefully next week will be a little bit more quicker. And I'll walk my dog, which I did, but I'll walk my dog very long before. Yeah.
I'll be on time.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.